Sister Location has always been a difficult entry in the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. From the gameplay to the story, every single fan has their own opinion and interpretation of the game. But the biggest challenge to this day is what suit we're in during Night 4. I recently watched this video from the channel FuhNaff, which you should definitely check out once you're done here. John's video, along with research I've been doing for my own FNAF world theory, got me thinking harder about this mystery. Originally, I believed this to be a Golden Freddy or even Fredbear springlock suit. My reasoning was that in every other game up to that point, the only times the player has ever been inside of an animatronic was if it was Freddy. In FNAF 1, the game over screen shows the guard's fate after getting caught. He got stuffed in a Freddy suit. In FNAF 2, we wear an empty Freddy head to ward off some of the animatronics, and the game over screen is once again being stuffed inside a Freddy suit. In FNAF 4, we see the bite of 83, which shows a child dying for being caught inside Fredbear's jaw. A bit more evidence for this was a phone call on Night 2 of FNAF 3. The tape recording that phone dude plays for us says,
"Right now we have two specially designed suits that double as both animatronic and suit."
My understanding from this was that there were only ever two springlock suits created, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Like, only one restaurant had these suits. None of the others did. And I now know that was most likely not correct. But the point for this is that by the time Sister Location was out, the player had only ever been in a Freddy suit. I don't think this is the case though. I think I know what the springlock suit on Night 4 is, and that it could be the key to who Death Guy in FNAF World really is. Strap in guys, you're in for a wild one. To get started, let's go over what we know about the springlock suit on Night 4. It's an old suit from Circus Baby's old pizzeria, Circus Baby's Pizza World. The restaurant was only open for a single day before being closed due to gas leaks, when in reality it was because of the death of William Afton's daughter Elizabeth. We're also told it was never used, at least not how it was meant to be. The suit has faceplates similar to the Fun Times and has an aged and cracked texture on the inside from where we can see out of. This texture is almost identical to that of cracked porcelain, which further shows the age of this contraption. That's really all we know about the suit for sure, but it's enough to lead us on the right path. If the suit was originally from Circus Baby's Pizza World, we can assume it's likely some sort of clown character and not any of the animal-based ones we know like Freddy or Bonnie. I don't even think it's Chica if I'm being honest. The mouth on the Night 4 suit is straight across the top, while Chica's is curved because of her beak. Even if you took the beak off, the opening would still be curved upwards. Plus, there's just not any evidence to lead me to believe it's her. To me, this has to be a humanoid suit we're in. For a long time, I've suspected the events of Sister Location to take place sometime in the 90s, while the creation of the characters and the restaurant happened sometime in the 80s. If this original springlock suit was made in the 80s, it would make sense that the inside is cracking due to age and potentially being used in a way it was not meant to be used. Like harvesting remnant for instance, just like the Funtime animatronics. I believe this mystery springlock suit is an original design of either Ballora or Baby, and one is more likely than the other. The shape of this mask fits Ballora and the Minirenas almost perfectly. The faceplates are in the right spot, and while Ballora's eyes are shut most of the time, she still has eyes underneath that we can see when the plates are open. You could argue this isn't Ballora due to us seeing her get scooped during this night, but remember that these are older versions of these characters, not the new and advanced ones that are active. This reasoning aside, I still think Ballora isn't the right choice. While the physical similarities match up, the story connections aren't there. Scott wouldn't even give us an answer during his interview with Daka when asked about this night.
Whose suit is that? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that for you.
That's fine.
That's gonna have to remain a topic of discussion.
Ballora is a fan favorite for, obvious reasons, and the theory of her being inspired by Mrs. Afton is one I hold on to dearly. But I don't think this is enough to convince me that she's the culprit here. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I honestly think that we're inside of an old Circus Baby springlock suit. I promise everything will make sense here in a little bit. Security Breach started giving subtle hints that we're going to be revisiting the origins of Fazbear Entertainment in the coming years. Some of the collectibles throughout the game are posters from Fredbear's Family Diner and Fredbear's Singin' Show. Ruin honed it in even more with the Brazil ending when he put on the Vanny mask in front of a 70s Fredbear cutout, along with the old mascot suits in the Mimic's lair. Help 1 and 2 is looking to show even more with all the Sister Location references and minigames we're getting from it. If you've been keeping up with other YouTubers in the community, you'll know that a major theory going around right now is that Fredbear started with some kind of circus, whether it be local to the town or traveling. I agree wholeheartedly with this, and I'll dive a little deeper into that when I go ham with my FNAF World theory, but for today, we just need to worry about what went on from 1983 onwards. We know Fredbear's family diner had the original Fredbear and Spring Bonnie suits, and that after an incident at a sister location involving multiple springlock failures, they were retired to be looked at by technicians and replaced. It's very possible that they were looking at redesigning the suits to be safer to wear at the restaurants, but after a while, the company just gave up on them. Henry was a designer of the original animatronics along with the core 4 we know and love. If he did make the springlock suits, he would also be one of the main technicians looking to remake them. However, I think the death of the crying child, who I like to call Evan, was the catalyst for everything else that happened. I still subscribe to the theory that Evan was the first death while Charlie, Henry's daughter, was the first murder and happened shortly after. Keep this in mind for later when we put everything together. So, if Henry designed all the springlock suits, then he must have designed the one we see on Night 4. But why Baby specifically? If you look at the extras menu after beating Sister Location, there's a section on the making of the fun times. We can clearly see Baby was originally going to have brown hair, but was changed to red in the final design. Nobody really knows why this is. Some have thought it's a clue to the Charlie bots in the Silver Eyes trilogy, and who knows, maybe it was. The Charlie bots will come into play a little later, but at the time of when the game was released, I think it was meant to be something bigger. A lot of fans have theorized that Dusky in FNAF World is supposed to be Henry. Dusky tells us about how he made something terrible and that her name is Baby. It's too late to deactivate her. Considering that he only calls her Baby and not Circus Baby, I don't think the full animatronic we see in Sister Location is the same one Henry built. I gotta give huge props to John's video for bringing some official concept art to light about the old mascot suits. The faceplates and stomach hatches are older versions of what the fun times might have looked like before Circus Baby's Pizza World opened. If Henry was the one designing these, he could have been playing with the designs for Pizza World while keeping with the Springlock trademark of the company. But as we know, the fun times aren't Springlock suits. They're full animatronics, each equipped with lures and traps to kidnap kids for William's remnant experiments. The fun times are all really advanced though, and don't seem to be super old. Does that mean this couldn't have happened in the 80s? Not necessarily. Remember what series we're talking about. William is a mad scientist and engineer who put his own children's lives at stake for his work. He discovered remnant, which is basically soul metal that you can literally inject into other metal to make the animatronics come to life. I don't think animatronics with sound lures, proximity sensors, and ice cream dispensers are out of the realm of possibility here. However, the one in Night 4 is a lot simpler in its design and mechanics. The original concepts for the mascot suits are also shown to be worn on endoskeletons and look similar to what we see in Sister Location. I think Henry was working on Springlock suit concepts for Circus Baby's Pizza World before Charlie died, and he abandoned the project and the company. He had made an early version of Baby with his daughter in mind. Baby's brown hair and green eyes represented how close the relationship was and how much Charlie meant to him. FNAF World shows us the aftermath of her death and how it affected Henry. He couldn't handle the pain and guilt of his own creations causing harm to others, so he left the company and disappeared. But if he's supposed to be Death's guy, why does he show up in Pizzeria Simulator? Shouldn't he be dead if that's the case? Not quite. While Death's guy is shown to have either taken himself out or be killed by Baby, depending on your own interpretation of the scene, Henry is also often compared to Edwin Murray in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. Edwin is an engineer and technician at Fazbear Entertainment who also had a child tragically die. After the death of his son, David, Edwin disappeared for decades before coming back to the company. Henry technically does come back decades later for the events of Pizzeria Simulator. While the ending for both of these men is different, their backstory is very similar. If Death's guy truly is Henry, then this would mean he had to fake his death to get away from everything. With him gone, Afton was able to swoop in, take over the company entirely, and use Henry's work as his own to fuel his evil deeds. After seeing the potential with test runs of the original Baby suit, he created the Funtime animatronics and claimed to have made Circus Baby for Elizabeth. He changed the design just enough to not be mistaken for the older model, but when Elizabeth died to her, the eyes changed back to green, just like Elizabeth's. This led to Afton shutting down Pizza World, turning the animatronics into remnant collectors, and going back to the shutdown Freddy Fazbear's location to collect what he could for himself. He gave Michael the task of going down to put his sister back together, died to the Springlock failure, and the rest is history. But that's not all. There's one more piece of evidence that I think fully proves my theory, and it's actually in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie that just came out. Spoiler warning for the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to skip to this timestamp for a general overview of this theory. If you're sticking around, let's get to it. In the movie, we get several good shots at some extra suits in the parts and service room. Along with a hilarious reference to Sparky the dog, we get a good look at another Springlock suit when the movie explains how they work. The suit is of a doll-looking girl with rosy cheeks, curly hair, and a hat. This suit looks almost exactly like Ella, an animatronic doll from the Silver Eyes trilogy. To give a brief summary, Ella was created by Henry for Charlie and made to match her size as a small child. She was originally an old ragdoll that, after Charlie was killed, Henry poured his agony into, which brought her to life. Henry ended up creating 4 different animatronics inspired by the Ella doll, whom he believed had a soul, to recreate the different stages of his late daughter's life. Ella was the first, the youngest version. Now, why do I bring this up? A few reasons, really. The movie takes a lot of inspiration from the trilogy, specifically the first book, The Silver Eyes. It's not one-to-one, obviously, but many of the story aspects are derived from this book. With this being the case, having a springlock animatronic that looks almost exactly like Ella is interesting. Now, obviously, Ella isn't the same as Baby. However, in the same trilogy, Baby turns out to be a Charlie bot that Henry never finished, the oldest version, but instead, William stole her and made her to be his own creation. With Ella being connected to Baby and Charlie, it's hard not to see how she could be hinting towards Sister Location's Night Force suit. Ella also shows up in the Fazbear Fright story 1:35 a.m. She's able to mimic the voices of the main protagonist's friends and family. This is very similar to what the Fun Times are able to do with their sound lures. It isn't nearly as important right now, but it is an interesting tidbit to connect her further to Baby. We do have to remember that the games, books, and now movie are all completely separate canons from each other, but they still hold similar storylines and themes. Obviously, the physical differences between Ella and Baby are noticeable, especially putting the Night Force suit in the mix. I'm also not trying to say that Ella is the Night Force suit, even though I wouldn't be shocked if that were true. But I think it's safe to say these connections match up pretty well overall. Alright, I think that's basically all my evidence and explanations for this theory. Let me tie this all up for you neatly so you can get the big picture. After an employee at another location sustained injuries due to multiple simultaneous springlock failures, a message went out to all locations saying not to wear the suits anymore. But this didn't stop them from being used on the animatronics per se. This is what led to Evan's death the bite of 83. While William wasn't exactly the best father, he still grieved over his son and vowed to put him back together. One drunken night, he drove past the restaurant and saw Charlotte Emily locked outside. He murdered her in cold blood, leaving her body behind the building, and drove off. Henry had already been hard at work redesigning the springlock suits for the current and future restaurants. One in particular was of a clown girl with brown hair and green eyes for a circus-themed spin-off restaurant the company was planning. Henry had made the animatronic as a tribute to his daughter and named her Baby. After Charlie's murder, he couldn't go on working with the company. He faked his death and disappeared for years, leaving behind all his old work. William stole his old business partner's blueprints and made them his own. During the construction of Circus Baby's Pizza World, the bite of 87 along with more murders took place at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that had been open for just a few weeks. The place had to be shut down, which seemed promising to the future of Pizza World.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
During all of this, William had been using the old springlock suit to test out his remnant collecting. While it worked just fine, he knew he could make it better if the springlocks weren't part of the design. So he created the Fun Times with the original Baby as inspiration. He stole Henry's intent for Baby too, saying she was made for his own daughter instead. But Pizza World was only open for one day before Elizabeth died. After she began possessing the animatronic, William used her and the others as full-time remnant collectors. The old springlock suit was of no use to him anymore, so he got the endoskeleton scooped out and left the remains in the scooping room, never being touched again until Michael gets stuck inside for an entire night. Now I admit I may have taken a couple liberties here and there, but I do think this is a solid answer to some mysteries we still don't know to this day. We all know Baby is important to the overall story, but I think her starting out as a springlock suit would be absolutely chilling and even more evidence towards the origins of Fazbear Entertainment. Regardless of if you agree or not, you can't deny this makes some sort of sense. Let me know your own thoughts down in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.